with Joe Schwartz. We are pleased this week to bring you an intimate conversation with Dr. Yakir Englander, a dear friend who I'll speak about in a second. But first, take a listen to our amazing theme song. So, hello everybody. Welcome to the IDRA Hour. Every week we're going to be bringing you conversations about Jewish culture, Jewish ideas, anything Jewish that is interesting and alive and dangerous and thought-provoking. Last week we were pleased to have our inaugural session with Jeff Israel. We spoke with Professor Jeff Israel about the Haggadah. And this week we're bringing you a conversation with another dear friend of mine, Dr. Yakir Englander. I want to start today thinking a little bit with you about the idea of a Jewish journey. That's become a well-worn phrase in the past, however, a decade or 2 decades. People ask, what is your Jewish journey? And what they mean by that is, what does Judaism mean to you? How has it come to mean that? Where do you find yourself in the unfolding meaning of Jewishness in your life? It's a bit of a cliche at this point to speak about a Jewish journey. It's already jumped the shark enough that we laugh a little bit at the idea. But I want to take it somewhat seriously, although I don't know that everyone can take it seriously. A Jewish journey is something that's possible really in America, I think, where for many Jews, although not for all Jews in America, Jewishness is something that we can opt into or opt out of. It's part of our identity, and we live in a world now in the 20th and 21st century in which we construct our own identities. We pick those pieces of ourselves that interest us, that compel us, and we either choose to invest in them if they do, or if they don't, we dispense with them. And I think it's fair to say that in my life, Jewishness has that quality. Jewishness is a brute fact of mine. I'm Jewish in the sense that both my parents are Jewish. It was something that I knew myself to be. But I didn't really understand much about my Jewishness growing up, except that it was a thing that we were. My mom really loved, my mom actually, by the way, it's worth remembering right now that today is would have been my mother's 79th birthday. She passed away 7 years ago. She was a strong influence on me. For my mother, Jewishness was very much the way that Lenny Bruce, the comedian Lenny Bruce, defined Jewishness as a sort of a sensibility. She loved Lenny Bruce's routine in which he went through a series of increasingly absurd nouns and designated some as Jewish and some not as Jewish. I can't remember all the things he said that were Jewish. Famously, lime jello was not Jewish, although he didn't use that word. He used the word goyish, which is obviously, or at least possibly offensive, let's say non-Jewish. Whereas jazz, let's say, would be Jewish. Jewishness is a sensibility. And then over the course of my life, the Jewish question became much deeper, and I chose to engage with it more and more, to take it more seriously in my life. For me, that began by a trip to Israel when I was 19 years old, as it is for so many. I'm old enough not to have been able to go on a birthright, but I went to Israel just to learn the Hebrew language, which I knew I could do in Israel, and I came back knowing a fair amount of Hebrew and fell in love with Hebrew. And then at some point later on, I took it that much more seriously and went to rabbinical school, became a rabbi. And that's my Jewish journey is one of increasing fascination, increasing depth. But as I say, that's very much an American story. That's a story in which Jewishness is optional. That's not everybody's story. For many Jews, certainly for most Jews throughout history, and for many Jews in the world today, Jewishness really is a given fact of their life. And what it comes to mean to them is quite different. I was privileged a few years ago, as I was traveling along my Jewish journey, to come into contact with Yakir Englander. Yakir is, as you'll see soon, a special soul. And when I sat down with him, it immediately became clear to me that he was engaged in a very different kind of journey than I was. His progress really from Jewishness into something else, into evolving into a different kind of person than he was born into, is his story. And this story of starting in one place and ending somewhere else, that's very much the theme of Pesach, of Passover, which is just around the corner. And so Yakir agreed to sit down and talk with me a bit about himself. He is on one hand a great soul, on the other hand, in some ways shy. So I promised him that we would have an intimate conversation here, talking about his life, and he was not comfortable just making it about him, so about my life as well, and what the story of Passover has come to mean for him, how he sees it as part of his life. So I'm going to text Yakir right now and tell him to join us. And we are really so pleased to have Yakir with us today. I hope you all, while we're waiting for Yakir to join, I hope you're all doing well at home and surviving. I have to say that a week was the last show a week ago, and it feels like much more than a week. We are living through very strange times, very difficult times, in which time is stretching outward, taking along, particularly for those of us who have little children at home. Although I imagine not having little children at home is its own challenge as well. Let me say another word about Yakir before he joins us. Yakir is not only a fascinating man, he's also a man of many parts. As we'll hear, he grew up in a Hasidic community, in the Vizhnitz Hasidic community, and then immediately went to university and got a PhD, and he's now the author of two books as well, which I expect he'll speak to us about. Hold on, let me let him in here. Here we go. Yakir, are you with us?
I am. Hello.
Hello. Let's turn
Can
on
you hear me well?
I can hear you very well, but we can't see you yet.
Let's see what's the options. Normally there is no problems. I don't see the video option here. Do I have the option to join you with a picture?
Right now. Hold on.
Yes, here I am.
There you are.
Thank you so much for having me.
Welcome, Yakir. I was saying a few words about you and how we met before you joined.
Yeah.
So why don't we just, before we get into our relationship, let's just hear a little bit about your background, if that's okay.
Yes. So first of all, thank you for having me. Maybe the best way how to introduce myself will be by praying together. I think the world needs prayers to life, to the divine, or any understanding of that. So I was thinking about one of the prayers that I deeply love. The pasuk, there is a verse that says, "Aneshama lach v'aguf pa'alach, chusa ala malach," which I found the translation is, "The soul is yours and the body is your handiwork. Have mercy on the fruit of your labors." And there is a beautiful melody. So may I pray it?
Please.
הנשמה לך והגוף פועלך Chusa, chusa, ala amalach, aneshama והגוף פועלה חוסה חוסה על המלאך הנשמה לך והגוף פועלך חוסה חוסה על המלאך. Thank you so much.
Thank you. You can tell that the chesed is still alive and well within you.
Yeah, 100%. If not, it will be a huge failure to leave the community.
So
I mean,
that's
my accent was, I didn't do the Hasidic accent. I didn't do like an Shumelach and Agif Palach. I try to make it more clear to the people who understand Hebrew. So, hi, Rabbi Joe. It's a real gift to be here. You asked me to introduce myself. So I had the gift, like a real gift, a real zchut, to grow up in a modern Hasidic family of the Vizhnitz dynasty. My parents, both of them are coming from Hasidic families, very different. My father was a child, a baby in the Holocaust from Vizhnitz, and my mom from the Alexander dynasty, which is a dynasty that totally was destroyed in the Holocaust. It's mostly from Krakow in Poland and Poland. So I grew up in Bnei Brak in a Hasidic family, but also a little bit more modern since my mom, she's from Belgium. I grew up in yeshivas, in the yeshiva world, studied there, and my life was, on the one hand, the Talmud, but my body and soul was very Hasidic, is very Hasidic. So I took this project very deeply, like seriously deeply. I tried to immerse myself in what I believed. In the way of how to touch life. This is something that I'm still thinking a lot about. I think that we are walking with the same questions, maybe most of our lives. However, in different times, in different chapters of life, we find different ways how to touch the question. I will not say even answers, because I don't feel that I have any answer, which is maybe something that we're going to focus today. So I grew up there. I loved it. I mean, of course, some parts make me, were hard, but I'm so thankful that I grew up in this world, because the Hasidic world, like probably any other society, they're asking specific questions. And what happened that when I decided to leave from sociological point of view, the Hasidic world, I found another world that is asking different questions, right? Or they asking the same questions from different perspectives. So I'm very thankful to have this background that like constantly walking and asking, where is God? Where is God? And how we as humans, we need to do the best in order to fulfill the reason that we are here. And these questions are fascinating. I think that these questions bring a lot of pain, because any existential question bring and raise pain. However, they are important. And I think one of the gifts of my personal life, and again, it's only about myself, that I had the gift to be born in the Hasidic family, but also thanks God that I'm not there, because I gain so many more voices and so many more flavors and gvanim, different colors of how to touch life. And this is my journey. So yeah.
So at what point did you decide you were going to leave that world? And if I can say, what was it that finally persuaded you to leave?
I don't know. My memory, Yerushalmi, he said that Jews don't have history, we have memory. I have narrative. I was living very different. So it's hard question. In a way, from very young age, I felt some distance from some elements inside the Hasidic world, like distinction between gender. I never understood why I can't be together and live together with my incredible sisters, and why they are not allowed to touch the most important text, which is the Talmud. And they only can study, like Bible, which is something that is for women in the Hasidic world. So I never understood it. They are much smarter than me. I had questions about that. I remember that I am at one point, I think I was 18 when I was sent to a therapist who was not ultra-Orthodox, but he was working with a lot of ultra-Orthodox, and he was Orthodox modern one. And I remember that I told him that, and he asked me like, so do you mean that you want to have sex with women? And I was like, "Who? No, no, no. I first want to talk with them." And he said like, men do not talk with women as friends, or that you want to have sex with them, or that you are gay. Now, this word gay was something that, like, you tell me you eat shrimp and ham on Yom Kippur. It was something that was huge fear for any Hasidic boy who has no idea what gay means. So I ran away from his room, and I remember that at that point I understood that something is very wrong with me. The main point that made me to make the distinction was when, I don't remember when was it, but two Israeli helicopters full with 73 soldiers were crashed on the way to Lebanon. And I remember that in my yeshiva, life was normal, and all over Israel, everyone cried.
Mm.
And I think that something told me it's not kosher. Again, it's about me. I don't say it was maybe in my yeshiva, but something told me if you want to be with Israelis, it's not enough to study Torah. You need to take the gifts, and you need to leave the world. And also, and this is the last part, I felt at one point, and this is very important, I felt that the incredible tools that I get in my life are not good enough for me to touch life. So for me, it was like I got the black belt in karate, and I feel like it's not enough. I need to go to study something else. I didn't know what there is outside. Um, but I felt that if I really serious about my mission with the divine and life, I must leave. And again, this is only me. I don't say to others to leave. It's a incredible, incredible, challenging thing to leave. You never have freedom. I never met someone who left the Hasidic world and found freedom or quietness, or ability to rest. I think that it's not surprised that so many ex-Hasidim and ex-ultra-Orthodox commit suicide 5-6 years later after they leave, because they deeply understand that they will never fit. And I encourage anyone who listens to us to go and watch now the Unorthodox Netflix series, which is about a Hasidic girl from Brooklyn. And I think it touched it very deeply. I think that as hard it was to leave the community, it's much harder when you understand that not many people asking here the same question in the same ways. And they are not like struggling about God and where's the divine and let's find it in the world. And walking with no answers is really hard.
Mm.
But this is what I think I call mature theology or mature being.
So if I'm understanding you, you're saying also that the Hasidic world is preoccupied with certain questions. One of them is, how do we find God? Where is God in our life? And it's a powerful question. It's a question that you still are asking, but it's a question that led you out of that community because there was something in that community that didn't let you, as you say, keep touch life. You were looking for something more, whether it was to grieve with your countrymen, right, with other Israelis, or to have a relationship with women that was not just sexual, but also was not forbidden in some ways, that was real and alive. There were all these aspects of life you couldn't reach.
Yeah, it's true. There is a beautiful Talmud. Is it okay to share?
Please.
So there is a verse in Leviticus in Vayikra that says, For they are my servants,
Well,
whom I brought.
hold on. Let's look at it together.
Oh, please.
I have it here.
Great. Can you read it in, maybe I will read it in Hebrew and you will read it in English?
Sure. Can you see the screen? I've shared it here.
Yes, I have it.
Okay.
Yes.
Here we have.
So it says, yes, כי לי בני ישראל עבדים, עבדי הם, אשר הוצאתי אותם מארץ מצרים, אני אדוני אלוהיכם.
Right. We talked about this a little bit in preparation here, and I went back in. It's interesting. Ki li v'nei Yisrael avadim. For the Israelites are my slaves. Now, avadim can be translated in many ways. My servants, my slaves. And then it repeats, avadaihem, right? They're my slaves, whom I brought forth, whom I brought out of the land of Egypt. And then God repeats again, I am the eternal, I am Hashem, Elohechem. Yeah.
Right. And then the Talmud, what is, do we have also the Talmud about that?
Well, I don't know that. I'm not sure which piece.
Okay. So I will tell you. There is a Talmud in Baba Metzia, in the Babylon Talmud, in the Tractate Baba Metzia 10a, and I will just say it.
Please.
It's very short. It says, they are my slaves and not slave of slaves, which I deeply love. I'm thinking a lot about this statement of the Talmud, where the Talmud actually tried to say, if I understand it well, that God says, if you're going to be my slaves, at least you're going to be the slaves only of me. Oh, and this will give you freedom not to be slaves of other things. Or as in Vizhnitzer Rebbe said, we are wearing black because we don't want to be the slaves of Paris, like the fashion of Paris. It's like they change it every year. We wear for whatever, 1,000 years, the same clothes. And I think a lot about that, because what actually, and this is what I wish to do with you today, Rabbi Joe, is to think about mature theology. What exactly it says. I think that there is a romantic desire, real desire, human desire, that we will walk with answers. It's like, I am okay to be the slave of the divine, of the Jewish divine, of Judaism, if I know that it will give me meaning, it will give me answers. It will give me answers. This is the issue, right? And I think that it's beautiful. And I really think that people deserve it if this is what they need. But as one of my friends, who is an ultra-Orthodox rabbi who grew up secular Israeli in Tel Aviv, and he has now a Rosh Yeshiva, and he has like 12 kids. And one time when he was upset on the ultra-Orthodox world, he told me, I will tell you what's the problem with them. He said, we are genius inside the Hasidic world to raise kids. We are catastrophe to raise adults. And he said the difference is that kids need answers. You cannot teach kids, you cannot raise kids to be postmodern. In order to be postmodern, first of all, you need to give them modernity. Like if you want to give them to be post-Jews or whatever, post-halacha, you need to raise them with halacha, to fall in love with that in order that they can break it. And what's happening is that we need to walk with questions, and we don't have always the answers.
Well, I want to root this conversation in another text, if that's okay.
Please.
First of all, it's interesting. As a liberal Jew, as a Jew that's never lived inside of the Orthodox world, the idea that we are, Avdei Hashem, servants of God, is an abstract notion. I've never actually lived in a real, enforced way under the command of God, right? And you have. You've lived that way, and then you've also left that kind of servitude for another kind of life. And it's interesting that you said earlier, that ex-Hasidim never really find the freedom they seek, right? So there's a kind of right. First we were slaves in Egypt, and then God made us slaves of God, and then certain brave souls break free of that freedom from God and go looking for a different kind of freedom, a third kind of freedom, a third state. It's not being in Egypt, and it's not being in servitude to God, and yet they're still looking. And maybe that's living with questions. And let me I began this before you came on, talking about how we met one another and how in some ways we're engaged in journeys. We're passing each other in the middle, perhaps, or maybe we're going to now walk. We'll walk together, but we were moving in different directions.
Joe, you don't have a chance. We are walking together.
We're walking together.
Yeah.
So, I was walking toward Jewish things, and in some ways you were walking away. And yet, it's worth saying that before I knew you, you were one of the prime movers of Kids for Peace. You were one of the founders of Kids for Peace, which is now a thriving organization to help achieve peace through children in Israel and Palestine. And then you were working for the Israel-American Council, where you still work today, working with the hundreds of thousands of Israelis and their struggles with living in America as well. So you've left, but you've not exactly left, right? But here's a text that I think speaks to us. I mean, if I can cast us in Talmudic roles.
But maybe I would just, before the text, I just want to say something.
Yeah.
There are two kinds of leaving. Yeah. You can leave because you feel that something is wrong. This is not my style. I'm leaving, it's like I leave from sociological point of view. I feel that I walking with so much wisdom, so many songs, melodies, stories, Hasidic, Talmud. I'm walking with that. What is a danger, and this is something that I think it's very important to all of us to remember, is if it's hunting you, like if my Hasidic background will hunt me, if I will feel all the time that I'm walking with that and I feel guilt or whatever, then it's a problem, because then it means that I didn't leave. If I would leave and I will not care, it will be so sad for me. It will be the sadness day of my life if I will not care about all the gifts that I got. And it's not leaving. For me, it's like I left from sociological point of view, but I'm walking with that, and I'm like, can bridge between world. And it's the same, as you said, I was living and working for peace and dignity. I don't know if peace is the right word today, but dignity in Jerusalem, to find the peace inside hundreds and thousands of youth in Jerusalem. Now I don't live in Jerusalem, but it doesn't mean that I don't care, or that I say like, oh my God, how I could live in this horrible conflict. It's like, no, I carry it with me. My personal journey, my personal closest thing for truth, because I don't know what truth is, told me at one point, you need now to walk to another, not instead, but another beautiful journey that I don't know a lot about. And I'm so privileged that the Israeli American community came to me and said like, would you like to create our leadership? And like, hell yes. I would work with anyone who come to me and say, Yakir, would you like to help us to be better? Not because I am better, just because I love doing it with people. Let's
talk of this talk, because what you say is beautiful, and yet it also seems to smooth over, I think, to make smooth what to me feels also is still rough and difficult. I want to talk about this a little bit more. So here's a text, perhaps a well-known text to some, to others. I want to be clear that I am not Rabbi Meir and you are not Rabbi Elisha ben Avuya.
I wish.
And I wish. But here's a story about leaving and not leaving. Yeah. I think I'll just read it in English, and we have across the page, we have the Hebrew. If there's something in the Hebrew that I missed in the English, let me know, okay?
Please, yes.
So here we have the story of Rabbi Meir, who was the Talmid Muvhak, who was the favorite student of Rabbi Elisha ben Avuya. And there are many different ways I'd like to understand how you understand Rabbi Elisha ben Avuya's leaving the Jewish community. But he's left already at this point. And yet Rabbi Meir still thought he had something to teach him and wanted to learn from him. So here we have the story. Once Acher, it's the name that the Talmud gives to Rabbi Elisha ben Avuya, the other one, was riding on a horse on Shabbat. And Rabbi Meir, his prize student, was walking behind him to learn Torah from him. First of all, just that scene is amazing. Just that scene is amazing. Here's my teacher doing something, right? Riding a horse on Shabbat that I know he shouldn't be doing, according to my understanding, but he's my teacher, and so I follow him. I follow him even into that place. Acher said to him, Meir, turn back. For according to the steps of my horse, I've calculated the Shabbat boundary ends here. Right? For those who observe Shabbat according to the laws of Shabbat, there's a distance beyond which you can't walk on Shabbat. And so he's telling the student, we've now reached that point where you can't go any further. And so Rabbi Meir says to him, Ata chazor b'cha. Right? So you too turn back, meaning do tshuva, come back home, come back to this community. Acher replied, I have told you already that I heard a voice from behind the curtain. Behind the curtain means this is God's voice. He has vision of what God is saying, or not. I'm interested in what you think. Behind the curtain calling, return rebellious children, the call to repentance, to tshuva from Jeremiah. Return rebellious children, chutz mi'acher, except for you, Elisha ben Avuya.
What a beautiful, beautiful Talmud. Like where today we can find, please help me to find it. In the past 50 years, any theologian, Jewish, Christian, you know what, let's leave the other religions. A Jewish theologian, a Jewish Rebbe, a Jewish whatever, who will write such a beautiful text, right? With so much courage.
So much here.
So much. So I think, first of all, we need to gain back the courage to write incredible texts like that. And in order to write these texts, we need some people to be Rabbi Meir, to be existentially in our society, not to kick them out, but to have in our Jewish community people who are Rabbi Meir and people who are Acher, the other. Now, a few things that I see in the text. One, and this is very important for me, because this is exactly what I have challenged sometimes with people who, grow up in a liberal world. In order to be acher, first of all, to become the other, first of all, you need to be part of the us. And then you need to rebel against the us. So if you grow up liberal and you continue to be liberal, you didn't rebel. Like there is something that you need to rebel. So the question for me is, in which way, and we need to be sensitive towards it, okay? In which ways our children, our young generation, or our adult, it doesn't matter, what are the moments that they decide to become acher? What is the acher, right? What is the acher of our generation? So if you are an Orthodox, it's very easy. It's like you are not Orthodox, okay? You are
right.
unorthodox. But if you are liberal, which kind of openness as a community we need to have that our kids or our adult, doesn't matter, that someone who will come and says, I am acher, it doesn't mean that I'm now more liberal. I'm different than you, and we will still accept them, right? So I think one way is someone who became like more conservative in religious point of view or whatever, political. Another option is that they will break something very deeply and will tell us, I can't continue like that. And I really think that we need to look very deeply and says, where are the places that in our generation that people beg us, please, we need to change, right? It doesn't work for us. Yeah. So is it about concept of what sexuality is, which we, today we need to learn to speak about that, totally different. Maybe about touch, it's like maybe about how we pray, maybe about how we do Jewish. Now, this is the first thing.
Let me just say one thing that you said that was interesting, though. You said, what can they break or what can they rebel against, and we still accept them? But in the context of this story, right, Rabbi Elisha ben Avuya, by the majority, by Rabbanan, he's not accepted. I mean, he's out of the community. And it's true that Rabbi Meir still loves him and still sees that he has something to teach.
So I'm not so sure. First of all, because they have a huge fetish about him, because he come again and again, they try to deal with him, which means that he is something else. Now, if he was not irrelevant, they would They will kick him out, and it will not be part of the narrative. The fact that he is in the Talmud, and by the way, this is only small portion. After that, God doesn't, after his death, God doesn't want to study his Torah, and there is fire, like a smoke from his grave. And Rabbi Meir says, like, no, it will not work like that, God. Like, he's one of us, and I'm studying his Torah. And then at the end, God studies the Torah of Acher, which means that someone who wrote the text said, no, this Acher is one of us. And I think it's very, very important. Now, the other thing, Joe, is that Acher, what Acher saw, right? So Acher went to the Pardes. He went to try to touch the divine, okay? And it doesn't matter if it's like to understand the ontological of the divine or to feel the divine, because, I go to synagogues and I hear so many rabbis speaks about God, right? Or about the divine. I'm also have the gift to teach in rabbinical schools. And I'm asking my students, beloved students, did you ever feel the divine? Most of them never felt it.
Yeah.
So what do we talk about?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a nice reading, because I think, right, we don't know. Rabbi Acher is not necessarily giving up on God or even giving up on what it means to be a Jew, whatever that meant in his time. It's a verdict on the community that he's coming from.
Thank you.
I can't be part of this community because the community doesn't answer the kinds of questions that I have. Maybe no one can answer those questions, but the questions that I'm seeking have to lie beyond the community.
And what I love is that he keeps the contact with whomever wish to study with him. So we have Rabbi Meir as a student, as his chavruta. And because he needs to go to a journey to try to find questions about the divine, about life. Let's call it life, okay? Now we have 3 other people. So we have one who died, right? He found that something is broken about the divine and he died. One became crazy and crazy. And the Talmud explained that he's crazy because he tried to solve his contradiction about the divine. So he doesn't have the courage to say, it's broken. I need to go and find new tools, how to touch life, how to be vulnerable, like how to keep this vulnerability and to go to a journey. And Rabbi Akiva is the most boring. I'm sorry. It's not me. It's Ari Elon said, like he came inside in peace. He came back with peace. Okay, so you have the peace and chalas, enough. And even the Talmud says, there is a midrash that says, that he had a special hashgacha, a special, blessing from a rebbe or whatever, that he will not have questions. So if you don't have question, you didn't go to the journey. Acher, he cared deeply. He cared deeply about the communities that he left. And this is what I love about him. He said to Meir, be careful. There is halacha. You have halacha. Please keep it. It's irrelevant for me because I'm on a different journey.
So let me go back to the story again here. First of all, thank you. I also hesitated over how much to include and how much to exclude. And what's great is I excluded stuff, but you know it anyway, so you bring it all in. So that's great. Let's go back. So what's wonderful here is that both Rabbi Acher and Rabbi Meir, like lovers, right? Like lovers, they understand the subtext of their conversation at the same. Both of them. It's not that one of them gets the subtext and one of them doesn't get the subtext, which is beautiful. Only good friends can speak, with double entendre in that way, right? So when Acher says right in the beginning, turn back, we've reached the limit. What he's saying is both physically, it's Shabbos and you can't go any further, and also there's an element of what I'm teaching you and what I have for you that's just not for you. It's beyond you. It's only where I can go, because you're committed to things that I'm no longer committed to. But then, wonderfully, Rabbi Meir doesn't take that answer from his beloved teacher, and he says, no, it's not me, it's you. You actually can come back. You can come back in. You tell me to turn back, you turn back. You can do it, which is beautiful.
It helps Rabbi Meir also to shift from to have like a childish theology to have a mature theology.
I think so too.
Right? Because Rabbi Meir, he wants his Rebbe to come back. This is a desire. Like, I want truth. I really want. If you would know how many times I have like this desire that I will have a dream, and the Vizhnitzer Rebbe that I grew up under, who passed away a few years ago, or one of my incredible rabbis, I had the gift, Joe, to meet saints. There are saints in this world. And I met some of them. I keep meeting them because this is my journey. I meet them in different religions, different methods. And I want one of them to come from the Olam HaHemes, it's from the other world, and tell me, Yakir, God loves you, right? This is all what I want to hear. You are good. But this is the answer. This is what will make Rabbi Meir also an adult. You are in the halacha, you need to go back, but you need to understand that your Rebbe is not going to come back. And there is a paradox in that.
So there are
And
two
walking with paradox, Joe, is the hardest thing. But, and here I want to say one more thing, if it's
please.
okay. This is mature freedom. And I say it with almost tears. Mature freedom is not to have truth. Mature freedom for some of us, not to all of us, for some of us. And we need to respect people who want truth. And they have truth. Hallelujah. Great. For some people, we're going to walk until the last days of our world with no truth. And we need to find tools how to support each other, love each other, and understand that walking without knowing is an incredible gift to the world because it brings tenderness to our life. When you don't know, you can become very gentle. You become gentle. I don't know. So let's start figure out, not in order to find answers, but in order to find different ways how to touch each other.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So when we go to synagogue and we speak about the vine, I think that we need to learn also to say very gently, if you don't feel the divine is also okay, but it doesn't mean that you cannot pray. You can pray to yourself. There is a beautiful Talmud that says that God prays. And the Talmud asks to whom God prays, and the answer God prays to God.
Right.
And then the question is, what is the prayer of God? Brochas, it's in Tractate Brochas, page 7. And the Talmud says, Yehi ratzon milfanai, like God pray to himself, herself, that ichbeshu rachamai et kaasai, that my mercy will overcome my anger, which means that God, we all need to pray. And it doesn't mean that we pray for truth. We pray to find the power to become better and to walk in this world. It's not a joke to be a human. This is something that I'm learning as I grow. I'm still very young. I have so much to learn, but I've learned that there is so much courage just to be, so much courage just to be in the world and to be kind in the world and to have the ability and the courage to come and say, I want relationship. I want to be touched. People think that it's hard to ask to touch someone. Do you know how hard it is to ask to be touched? Do you know how hard it is to say, I want to be touched in a way that I need? It's so much shameful, so much shame, so much guilt to say that.
Yeah.
To say that, it's a prayer.
Yeah.
And we need to say that. We need to name it. And we need to find the ways how to let people pray, because then they will find the words. Today we are lack of words. And this is what our wisdom, our beautiful tradition, as other tradition, can help us to do.
I think there's two mysteries in here. I agree with everything you say, and particularly the courage to ask to be touched and to move through the world without certainties and without answers. But it's not clear to me who in this story is in that situation. Right? Who is the one asking to be touched, and who is the one who is able to walk here without answers?
I think both of them, since they speak to each other.
They speak to each other, but look what Rabbi Meir says, come back, which you might say, come back to me. Maybe it's a lover in a real way. You touched me, and now you're leaving me, and I want you back. And Rebbe, and Acher says, I won't come back. And not just that, I know you're going to tell me about the possibility of tshuva, that everybody has the possibility of tshuva. Believe me, I've given that sermon many times in my life. And I want you to know that that's true. That is true for all humanity. Yirmiyahu Jeremiah the prophet called everyone to tshuva. It's true for everyone, but not for me. I am the exception. I'm the exception. That's exactly what he says. The doors of repentance are open to everyone, but not to me. I wonder what we think about that. I mean, that's a fascinating psychological portrait of a particular kind of personality.
I love it. I love it. I mean, listen, I love the questions more than I love the answers
Yeah.
always. I think that the answers is like when we teach the Jewish theologies that you want the students to know. So it's like, acher, but he cannot return. I think that sometimes you cannot return because you know too much, which means, in other words, if I Yakir today, I will decide to come back to be in a Hasidic community, I will become a danger for the community since I know too much. Even if I will shut up and will not share anything, something in the way how today I'm holding my body, I'm holding my sexuality, I'm holding relationship, I'm holding my touch, I'm holding my theology will hurt the Hasidic community. And therefore, my mature decision will be, not that I wish to, but my mature decision will be, you decided to leave, you cannot come back because you can hurt the sensitivity, of this specific community.
Yeah.
And I think this is a huge mature answer. I think that the desire, Joe, is fascinating because we all want to live like in Disney, in the Grimm, brothers' tales that we kiss and then we live forever, forever. And we do not. We do not.
Yeah.
Think about that, right?
I mean, you started by saying, what are the things that we can break today? What is the boundaries? But just because I have a contrarian nature, I'm looking at the story and I think, there's something very romantic about Acher, about that figure who goes beyond. Famously, Isaac Deutscher, the biographer of Trotsky, when he wrote The Non-Jewish Jew, this wonderful essay about Jews who've left Jewishness behind but retain some essential quality of Jewishness, begins with this story as the prototype of the one who leaves things behind. Increasingly, to me, Rabbi Meir is the surprising one, and maybe in a certain sense, he's you as well, right? And he's certainly me, right? It's not clear to me that Rabbi Meir knows less than Rabbi Elisha ben Avuya. After all, he's his student, right?
They know different things. They know different things because Rabbi Meir doesn't know what does it mean, what's the feeling of breaking halacha. And by the way, Baruch Hashem that he doesn't know. He should not know. This is not his role. He needs, Rabbi Meir is every Mishnah. If there is no name, it's Rabbi Meir. Okay, so he has a role. He needs to write most of the Mishnah. Acher, his rabbi, think about that. The one who taught him the Mishnah.
Yeah.
Right? He is the one who breaking every halacha of the Mishnah. Now, I understand that some people think that there is something romantic about that. Honestly, existentially, this is not my story. I'm not proud that I left the community. I don't think that I have courage. People ask me to write about that. I'm not interested. This is my journey. I don't feel that I really chose. I think something life chose for me in a way, not that I reduce my responsibility. I don't see it like that. I don't care. I'm thinking about which kind of life each one of them is leading and what the responsibility or what's the Torah that each one of them need to teach the community.
In the time that's remaining, this is related. In the time that's related, I want to look a little bit related to Pesach and how we can talk about this here. You started by singing the beautiful song, Haneshama lach v'haguf po'alach. Actually, there's three questions that come out of that song for me. He talks about the neshama, the soul, and then haguf, and the body, and then it talks about lach, right? Yours, somebody's. All three of those are sort of a mystery, but the soul and the body are directly related to the theme of Pesach, right? So let me just look a little bit here on important text for understanding Pesach. We have 10 minutes. I want to hear your thoughts on this, and I want to share my feelings as well, right?
Please.
So first, just the opening bit here of the Mishnah. This is a quote from the Gemara Pesachim, which begins with a quote from the Mishnah. It says, "Lefi da'ato shel ben aviv melamdo," right? The way in which we talk about the Exodus depends a lot on who we're speaking to. The way we tell this story depends on the da'at, right? On the intellect, or maybe something else, the spiritual level, maybe life experience, right? The quality of the person we're speaking to. And this goes to what you're talking about with mature theology, right? There are certain people who, not only who before whom we can be more grown up, but if we're not more grown up, we'll lose those people, right? Certain people need to be really spoken to at their level, and not down to. That's a general rule. And then we have the general rule for how we're supposed to tell the story of Yetziat Mitzrayim, of the Exodus. Matchil bignut, right? We start with disgrace, umisayem b'shevach, and we end with praise. Like any good story, we start low and we end high. But then we have a classic disagreement in the Gemara. So what are those different things? Okay, my gnut. Where do we start in this story? So Rav said, Rav and Shmuel were the great Bnei Plugta, right? The great arguing partners. Rav said, "Mitchila ovdei avodat gilulim hayu avotenu." At the beginning, our forefathers were idol worshippers, whereas his sparring partner Shmuel said, "Avadim hayinu." No, we were slaves. And tell me if you agree with this. The way that I've always read this is that Rav and Shmuel think that the important part of the story of Yetziat Mitzrayim is very different. Start with Shmuel, which is maybe a little less to be expected. For Shmuel, it's the story of Jewish bodies, of control over the self, over my actual physical self. I couldn't control myself. I was in somebody else's control. And wherever that story ends, it ends with us being not Avadim. Now, maybe as we start with Leviticus, it ends up with being Avadim to God and not Avadim to Paro, but in a certain way, it means that we are ourselves bodily again. Whereas Rav is saying something else, right? The story is one of spiritual progress, spiritual evolution. First, we started in some lower spiritual state, and then we grew spiritually. Now, we kind of know the way the Orthodox telling of this story, but I'm curious for you, right? And maybe for me as well, it's going to be a different answer. What is the gnai? What is the gnut? What is the place of humiliation or of disgrace that you began with, from which you are proceeding away? And maybe I'll try to answer it as well if we have time.
Yeah. Joe, can you help me? What do you feel? Why it's important for the Talmud in Psachim, which we also read in the Haggadah in a week? Why it's so important for them to share that at the beginning we need to start with a disgrace of our, grandparents? What is important for you?
Well, I think it's hard to appreciate our present reality without knowing where we came from, right? So unless you can contrast where you are with where you've been, it's hard to understand where you are. I think that's one way. But then where you are can be told in any number of ways, right? And so you really need to choose your background very carefully. Right. And I think that's why, so that we understand that where we are ends up, right. To me, the high point of the Seder is Hallel. You're building toward the singing of Hallel, the songs of praise, which are all about the Exodus from Egypt, but you need to feel it, right, at that point. And so you need to know where you've come from. What do you think the answer is there? Yeah.
I don't know. What is interesting for me is that what the Haggadah or the Talmud here is doing is breaking the halacha. Is really breaking halacha, because there is halacha which mentioned in the Mishnah tractate Bava Metzia that says that there is halacha which called ona'at dvarim, that when what does it mean? That if you share an information, as if like innocent, it's like, oh, tell me about our grandparents, but you do it maybe to tell something bad about the person, you are breaking the halacha. So the example that the Mishnah brings is if someone see a rabbi, but the rabbi, let's say before he was a gangster or a sinner, and he tells him, hey, do you remember the good time when we both were gangster? This is on advarim because you mention his past. Like you mentioned, or to a convert, you mentioned that before he was a non-Jew. Okay, in their understanding, it's a challenge.
Yes.
So what they're doing here is they're breaking the halacha. It's fascinating. It's like they're telling us something about the bad part. I think unless there is a deep understanding of the Talmud here, that we need to remember that it's not a surprise that all the main Jewish leaders have some portions in themselves that, according to the Jewish regular or straight understanding of Judaism, is dark or is disgrace. Okay, Rabbi Akiva come from converts and come from Amalek, that according to the Midrash. Moshe Rabbeinu grow up in the home of Pharaoh, the Hitler of that time. Esther we need to remember, the Queen Esther, she's the only one who continued to pay the price because the Jews had the miracle, but she's going to continue to be married to this asshole who, according to but he's an asshole. He killed his first wife. Sure. Let's say like that. He killed his first wife because something sexuality, which means this king never asked for consent in sexuality. And the Talmud understand it. And the Talmud understand that Esther, until the end of her life, she is sexual abuse and raped by this man because she never will give consent to the king Ahasuerus, right? So we have here deep understanding that our grandparents in the seed of our narrative, we need to understand that we all need to have some idol worships. I don't think I think that the disgrace is like halachically disgrace, but please remember that it's also part of us. And the same about slaves. We think that I will give you the funny example. I was on a date like many years ago, and the girl, she wanted to, she was in Israeli, and she wanted to, a little bit push me. She said like, oh, you grew up Hasidish, you are all close-minded. And I said like, why we are so close-minded? So she said, what do you mean? Like, you have sex, after marriage, it's so boring. I have freedom. So I said like, what's the freedom of Tel Aviv? What's the big freedom? So I said, listen, we as a Hasidim, we date 1, 2, 3 times, and then we have sex, right? What do? You date 1, 2, maximum 3 times, and then you must have sex. Like, give me an example of a couple in Tel Aviv who decide to walk for half a year, that the girl will come to the boy will come to the girl, or boy to a boy, whatever you want, and will say, my dear date, I really like you. Can we please, for first half year, I only want to hold hands.
Yeah.
Yes. No, it's not an option.
Yeah.
So don't speak with me about freedom. And I think that this is what the Talmud tells you. We are all slaves.
It's a powerful reading. I mean, it goes back to what you were saying earlier as well, which is that you leave the past, but you don't really overcome the past. The past stays with you, right? So to
we're
say
human beings,
right? Matchil bignut doesn't mean we begin it and we leave it behind. It means we all begin with gnut. We all begin with something in us that can be a point of shame, or it can be a point of pride. It can be who we come from. I mean, I think for me, it's, as I said, we're kind of on parallel journeys, or we started by walking, past one another. I think for me, the feeling that I come at all this for silly reasons, for identity construction reasons, that it's a plaything, that it's something that I'm trying on the way I would try on other ideas or fashions, is gnut in a certain sense, especially in this environment where we want to be serious, and yet and yet that's also my truth, right? That's also my reality, and there's no kind of overcoming that. I think that's a wonderful, by the way, kavanah, I have to say, for the Seder. If one piece of conversation from this can be carried with us, it's that rather than thinking of the story of the Exodus as one of leaving Egypt once and for all and finding some new frontier in which we're finally free, rather embracing Egypt.
Yeah, I think that if you, I have a teacher who passed away last year. He was incredible Catholic teacher, Jean Vanier. And he said that if, and I will quote for you, if I recognize also that there is brokenness because I am also broken and that's okay, then there is something that begins to happen. And I think this is what I try. I pray to have the courage to keep walking with. It's like we need to understand that the disgrace is our beauty. The parts of my body, and I learned it a lot in my life now, the parts of my body that for years I was shameful about, they tell an incredible stories. And people who wish for stories because they want to touch and to be touched as humans, they will fall in love with that. The question is how we teach ourselves to hold and to hug and to be proud in a way of our disgrace. And this is, I think, a beautiful thing to go to the Seder today with.
Absolutely. Let me just say, as I'm signing off here, that you're the author of a new book on the Hasidic or the Haredi relationship to the body.
Right. Yes.
Has it been translated into English yet, or it's
yes,
being?
Yes. It was published in Hebrew, and now I finished to translate it in English. And actually, I signed a contract a few days ago. It's still secret, but yeah.
How wonderful! To learn to be touched, even in the midst of our gnut, in the midst of our shame, is a great gift. Thank you so much, Yakir, for joining us.
Thank you. Toda rabba.
There's so much more to say, and to everyone else, I will see you again at this time next week with special guest Shai Tzabari, the wonderful Israeli musician who will be singing to us and explaining his thoughts on the Seder just before we start Pesach. So a good week to everyone. Stay healthy. Much love.